Hi, and welcome to April's edition of Classical Coffee. This concert is entitled Fresh Air and Fresh Sounds, and I'm in fresh air to start this series off. The series is really going to be centered on a couple of ideas. One is that all three composers, Beethoven, Michael Dougherty, and Francis Poulenc, all in one way or the other went back to their roots for inspiration for the pieces that we're going to hear. In the case of Francis Poulenc, it was his experience in Paris growing up. For Michael Dougherty, it was his experience as a jazz musician and a rock and roll drummer. And for Beethoven, it was his experience in growing up and learning at the feet of Mozart and Haydn. And so, for today, we actually have a fresh sound for you. Our guest artist, Paul Sinua, is going to give you a wonderful introduction to an instrument that you may not be familiar with. This is the Concert Champêtre by Francis Poulenc for harpsichord and orchestra. And Paul will give you a sort of a mini lesson on the harpsichord and how it works.
The harpsichord I'll be using for the concert was made in 1966 by William Dowd, a Boston-based harpsichord builder who sought to recreate instruments according to the principles of the 17th and 18th centuries. This instrument is made according to the principles of 18th century France, late 18th century France. And so it has some of the design characteristics and sound qualities that one would expect in one of those instruments. For newcomers to the harpsichord, the most striking thing is the inverse keyboard. As you know, the piano has white and black keys. In this case, we have black and white keys. The second most striking thing on a large instrument such as this is two different keyboards, or manuals. This instrument has 3 sets of strings, and each manual plucks a different set of strings. The upper manual, the lower manual, and then the third set of strings sounds an octave higher. On this video, you may not hear the distinct differences between the upper and lower manual, but in short, the lower manual, the strings of the lower manual are plucked more towards the center of the string, so you have a fuller sound. The upper manual, those strings are plucked closer to the bridge, so it's a more nasal sound. If I push in my upper keyboard, I can then pluck both sets of strings because the back of this key is now under the back of the lower key, and it engages that upper key. And you can see the upper keyboard's moving. And of course, with 2 strings sounding at the same time, you have a bit more sound. Now about that 4-foot register, which I played, this is the one that sounds an octave higher. It's called a 4-foot, taking its name from organ terminology. This is rarely played by itself. Usually, I would couple the 8-foot that you heard here and the 4-foot. Then if I push in this upper keyboard, I have 3 sets of strings plucking, really the loudest sound that this instrument will make. This instrument also has one other feature. It's called a buff stop. Up near the tuning pins, there are little strips of leather that I can engage to touch the strings, and what that does is it buffs the stop, sounding a little muffled as opposed to. This is all working on very, very simple principles. Underneath this is called a jack rail. This is the jack rail. We have 3 sets of jacks. The jacks are the part of the process which plucks the strings on the harpsichord. Remember, it's not like a piano where strings are struck. Here they're plucked. You have 3 rows, 1 for each type of string. So the upper 8-foot plucking here, and the lower 8-foot plucking here, and the 4-foot plucking just in there. I can pull these out if I need to do a little work on them, and you see a very simple mechanism which comes up and plucks the string, and then the string, the jack falls back, and then this rests on a damper, stopping the sound.